tight bend that helter-skelters its way up now, corkscrew fashion to the summit, where the crowd will be waiting to welcome McLaughlin, the winner of the Kelloggs Tour 2 years ago. He finished second last year to Malcolm Elliott and won a stage as well. Now he wants to see if he can get off to a good start. He did say to me earlier on, though, that he didn't know if he could be competitive or not because he didn't know what his leg would be like. But 6:20.53, that's the best time so far. As we return down to the bottom, this is Martin Earley of Ireland, the PDM rider who had a marvellous World Championship last Sunday, where he finished 7th.
Well, Martin's having quite a good year this year, actually. With that Tour de France stage victory, it put him up to 4 victories so far in this year.
And this will be the arrival, Paul, of Camarillo, who started 1 minute behind McLaughlin. He's going to beat McLaughlin, 6:16.04, and that is the new leader. And this is Martin Earley, who had a bit of a shock today when he found his handlebars are badly twisted after the air journey here. So he's fitted new ones, and he's now climbing steadily up to the summit of the Law. Riding very, very smoothly indeed. And this looks like Laurent Jalabert, a new professional coming up with a great time. Look at this, 6 minutes, 0.53 seconds, the new leader. And that is something of a surprise. So Martin Earley now has a new target to beat, and he won't know that the man ahead of him, Jalabert, has set the best time of a fraction over 6 minutes for the climb. Martin Earley now coming round to the finish, and the target he's aiming at is 6 minutes, 0.53 seconds. We should catch a glimpse of the clock, maybe. Yes, 6 minutes, 0.63, a tenth of a second too slow for Martin Earley. He goes second. Well, this is Pascal Lance here, the teammate, in fact, of Jalabert, who's making the start at the bottom of the climb. And the rider, in fact, who should be ahead of him on the road will be the Fagor rider, Francis Moreau. And this indeed is Moreau coming up, teammate of Stephen Roach, who is not here. He finishes third, best time, a little bit of a surprise too, 6:5.04 for him. Now I wonder what Paul Curran will manage, former British hill climb champion, Commonwealth Games gold medalist before he turned professional this year. He's off. Well, we should see Pascal Lance coming through. Here he is. And his teammate Jalabert is already home, but Lance has gone a fraction better. 6 minutes, 0.31 to go top of the leaderboard. He's just pipped his teammate as Jalabert. And down there below us is Paul Curran. And Paul Curran is reported to be on a ride. Well, there's Pascal Lance going down the mountain, but can Paul Curran on his way up do anything about the time? And he can't, yes he can, 6.17. Now that's going to take some beating. Paul Curran, the best time. So Paul Curran goes number 1. He also wears a 51. These are the situation now overall at the moment. Paul Curran on top, Pascal Lance is second.
Paul, great ride, 6:00.17, new leader.
Yeah, well, I'm quite early off. I'm number 36 off, so there's quite a lot of good lads behind me, so see how long it lasts. It might last a little while, but I don't think I'll win it.
Is it tough out there?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's the sort of climb where you have to pace yourself a little bit, 6 minutes. You can't go sort of hell for leather right from the bottom. You have to save us a little bit.
Well, this is Brian Walton. I mentioned Paul Curran's number there of 51. It's the most famous number in the Tour de France. It's been worn by more winners of that race. I wonder if it's an omen for Paul Curran in this year's Tour of Britain. This is Brian Walton here. His only major win as a professional, the milk race in England this year. Now he's going to go for what would be a unique double if he could pull off the full professional Tour of Britain. So Brian Walton climbing towards the summit. Paul Curran is heading the leaderboard with that ride a fraction outside 6 minutes. The clock is on the right. Well, he's gone past Paul Curran's time. Only 5th place for Brian Walton, 6:3.55. This is the British champion, Tim Harris, down in the basement in Dundee, now facing the climb. He's having his best ever season. Tim Harris from the rally team, of course, as he heads off now up towards the summit. Ronan Ponsek coming up. Had a disappointing Tour de France this year, and he finishes only 26th, 6:21.81. So, Phil Anderson on the start blocks now, the man with the long hair and the flying legs, the only Australian to wear the leader's jersey in the Tour de France. He's heading off the stars in this race, so join us after the break. Welcome back to the opening prologue time trial in this year's Tour of Britain. And Tim Harris here now approaching the finish. Remember that the leader so far is Paul Curran, but the British champion now coming up towards the finish line. Just over 6 minutes to beat, but he won't do it. 13th place for Tim Harris, 6:13.83. So this is the situation so far. Paul Curran keeping his lead, 6 minutes, 0.17. Pascal Lance is second, and Laurent Jalabert is in third place. Well, this is Phil Anderson now, who's partway up the climb of the Law. Remember this hill, which takes them right up to 572 feet. Phil Anderson, the first ever, and indeed the only Australian to wear the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, which he did now a few years ago. He was back in that race this year, and a winner, of course, this year of a stage in the Tour of Italy.
Well, this is the hardest part of the circuit here for a rider who may have started quickly. A lot of the riders early on in the race today have been cracking here, but Phil looks like he's still going very strongly. He's fighting the bike all the way to the top of this climb.
Well, Anderson, former stage winner, is now looking for victory on top of the Law. It's a real tough climb that the organisation sorted out for the riders here, because after this, of course, they then face 4 long road racing stages to take them down to Cardiff and then off to the city of Westminster for the final circuit race next Sunday. Early days, but these short time trials can so often affect the race. Remember that Malcolm Elliott won at this stage a year ago in Newcastle upon Tyne, and he ran out the winner overall. This is Sean Kelly now, taking the last few deep breaths before making the effort that may well put him on top of the leaderboard in the Kelloggs Tour. Sean Kelly goes then. A little bit disappointed, I think, with his third place in the World Championship a couple of days ago. And now we go back up to the top of the hill. Anderson struggling for his gears here. Looks as though he may have lost a little bit of time with that bad change. There's the crowd up on the hill there.
Well, this really is the hardest part of the course, Phil. As you can see, a lot of the riders here struggling, changing gears, trying to find a gear that's comfortable. But when you get to this part of the race, all the gears feel uncomfortable.
So Anderson making his way up towards the top. It's still Paul Curran who's keeping himself on top of the leaderboard. And that's a great ride by Paul. He didn't go to the World Championships last Sunday. He certainly had the selection to go, but he felt he wasn't fit enough for such a rigorous race as the World Championship. But he's a great rider. For the last 4 years, until he turned professional this year for the Bilton team, he was indeed Britain's finest amateur rider. Still Anderson here, climbing around the circuit that brings him up to the top of the Law. He's been out of the saddle now, I think, for the last 500 or 600 yards, working very hard up to the summit. 6 minutes is the time to beat, and it looks as though Phil is not going to do that. He's already outside Curran's time. 6:06.04, 8th place for Phil Anderson. And that's his wife Shelley there, putting the blanket round him as we go back down to the start. And Keith Reynolds, who's had a string of second places this year in major races all over Britain, and would dearly like to get himself a good win. A great rider, Keith Reynolds, a former British hill climb champion when an amateur rider. So this